Cyan, though confused, decided to stay calm. He turned to the girl and asked how she knew his name. With a serious look, he answered her question, saying yes, he was Cyanvert, and then asked who she was. The girl, Lunav, smiled and asked if she could sit next to him. Cyan, with a calm demeanor, told her that she still hadn't answered his question. Lunav introduced herself as a second-year student at the same academy as Cyan. The name Lunav sounded familiar to him, but he wasn't sure why she was acting so friendly. He told her that he didn't know her and wasn't interested in students from other years. Lunav, still smiling, explained that she was less known compared to someone as popular as Cyan. Cyan, surprised, crossed his arms, realizing he didn't know he was so popular at the academy. Brian and Nana, sitting across from them, remained silent. Nana asked Brian if Lunav was Cyan's friend. Brian, confused and sweating a little, said he had no idea, as they didn't seem like friends. Lunav looked at Brian and Nana and commented that Cyan's guardian knight and maid seemed very close. She was surprised to see them all eating together. Brian and Nana were taken aback by her observation. Lunav, with a playful look, noted that Cyan seemed warmer in person than the rumors suggested. Cyan, uncomfortable with her sudden praise, said there was no need for them to eat separately. Cyan remained on alert, finding it suspicious that Lunav was being so complimentary out of nowhere. He couldn't figure out her reason for approaching him. Lunav then asked if he had come to the capital to attend the banquet. Cyan, looking down, answered yes and asked how she knew. Lunav, moving closer, guessed that someone like him wouldn't leave the academy unless it was for something important like the banquet. Lunav placed her hand under Cyan's chin and looked calmly at Brian, stating that it was fine and that she'd meet Cyan at the banquet since she was also invited. Cyan listened silently, realizing she must be a noble, and wondered if she had also received a letter. The tension in the atmosphere grew, and Lunav, noticing this, decided to leave. She placed her hands on the table, stood up, and said that she regretted having to cut their conversation short, but she had to go. Before leaving, she asked Cyan not to forget about her. As Lunav walked away, her body emitted a powerful and intense mana. She turned back slightly and revealed her full name, Lunav Rainreaver. Cyan's expression changed drastically upon hearing this. He remembered that Lunav was the granddaughter of Rijin Rainreaver, the president of the Garam Magicians Association. In his past life, Lunav had died young while attending the academy, possibly due to her frailty or because of the harsh experiments conducted by the association. Cyan, now sweating, felt annoyed and confused. He realized that his involvement with people he hadn't known in his past life meant that the future could change. He recalled a large castle under the light of a red moon and pondered why all this had to happen during the banquet, which he began to think of as the Banquet of Blood. Meanwhile, in another part of the realm, Princess Erin, a woman with white hair and an elegant dress, stood in a room fixing her hair. She shyly asked Leximus if she looked good in the dress. Leximus, standing behind her, gave her a thumbs up and complimented her, saying she looked super pretty. However, Princess Erin seemed unsatisfied, paid no attention to the praise, and threw the dress onto the bed along with the others. Princess Erin continued trying on various dresses, but none of them satisfied her. Leximus, who was behind her, encouragingly giving thumbs up, started crying when another dress was rejected. Erin grabbed another dress and, after inspecting it, told Leximus it didn't look good on her either. Leximus, now confused and somewhat disappointed, reassured her not to worry, stating that Cyan would surely like seeing her. Princess Erin, holding a skirt in front of a mirror, blushed deeply at the thought of Cyan. She turned back, surprised, and asked if Cyan was attending the banquet. Leximus, exasperated, reminded her that she was the one who sent him the invitation, asking her to stop playing dumb. Erin, frustrated, tried to make an excuse, but Leximus interrupted her, saying it was obvious what she was feeling. At that moment, a maid approached with a box containing a gift from Erin's brother, Prince Luenel. The gift was a beautiful diamond necklace. Leximus admired the necklace, suggesting that Cyan would like how it looked on her. Erin, still blushing and now angry, rejected the idea, saying she didn't like the necklace. Later, Everyone arrived at the palace where the banquet was being held. The place was luxurious and filled with important people enjoying wine. Guards were stationed around, and a blonde-haired man stood with his hand resting on his sword. A blonde-haired woman stood nearby, silent. Cyan, with his back against the wall and hands in his pockets, surveyed the room. Despite the crowd, he couldn't spot his target. Cyan turned his head to observe his surroundings, his senses heightened. Not far away, in a hallway, Kellen was also leaning against the wall. Cyan noticed him immediately, understanding that if Kellen was here, then Askell must also be present at the grand banquet. Kellen, sensing Cyan's recognition, confirmed this by mentioning that Askell was currently with Prince Luenel. He added that there was something important he needed to share with Cyan. Cyan, his curiosity piqued, asked Kellen what was on his mind. Kellen, with a concerned look, suggested that Cyan should leave the banquet, fearing that information about the purification mission might have been leaked. When Cyan questioned him further, Kellen, with a troubled expression, admitted that he had a bad feeling. He believed that many people, including Cyan, could be in danger. Kellen revealed that Askell had instructed him to leave the palace before the banquet began because he had planned a small event. Cyan's expression shifted to one of shock and suspicion. He couldn't help but wonder if Askell was behind the so-called blood banquet. Kellen, seeing Cyan's reaction, explained that he couldn't bear the thought of Cyan being harmed, which was why he urged him to leave. However, Cyan, remaining composed, asked Kellen to withdraw, reassuring him that he would be fine. Kellen, reluctant but obedient, turned to leave, warning Cyan to be careful. Once Kellen was out of sight, Cyan's demeanor changed subtly. He began to smile, his eyes gleaming with a mix of intrigue and dark anticipation. The idea of Askell's little event fascinated him, making him realize that Askell was even more unpredictable and dangerous than he had anticipated. At that moment, Kira manifested beside him, her presence emanating a subtle yet palpable malice. She looked at Cyan with a sly grin and asked if he was worried about innocent people dying. Cyan, with his back still against the wall, hands in his pockets, closed his eyes and smirked. He replied to her calmly, saying that he wasn't worried at all. In fact, he found it almost endearing, the way things were unfolding. Cyan opened his eyes, his gaze distant and contemplative, as he realized that the most important task at hand was to postpone the purification mission. Using his technique, psychological influence, he began to send out subtle mental signals throughout the banquet hall, a method of psychic communication that only the members of Mist could use. Sarika, who was present at the banquet in an elegant dress, felt the influence and turned her attention towards Cyan. She responded to his mental message, feeling somewhat unnerved by the sudden contact. Cyan praised her, commenting that her dress suited her well, but Sarika, with a serious look, demanded to know what was going on. Standing before Cyan, who was leaning against the wall, she listened as he explained that they needed to postpone the mission to avoid drawing unwanted attention. Sarika, grabbing a glass of wine, asked him why they needed to delay. Cyan, with a calm demeanor, revealed that he had just received information indicating that the banquet would soon turn into an ocean of blood. This revelation caused Sarika's expression to change drastically. She began to tremble, her fear palpable, and asked him if what he said was true. Cyan, with a serious look, told her that there was no time for detailed explanations. They needed to first ensure there were no monsters nearby. Sarika, clearly shaken, pressed him further, asking if he was sure of his information's reliability. Cyan's eyes gleamed with a confident smile as he explained that he knew the person who could be behind this and had anticipated such a possibility. He added, with a smirk, that her perverted fiancé was also going to die in the chaos, and asked her if that wasn't good news. Sarika, blushing and confused, demanded to know how Cyan knew about her fiancé. Cyan turned away, casually telling her that he had to get to work, leaving her standing there with a mix of anger and confusion. Sarika watched him walk away, furious and sweating, but she managed to calm herself, agreeing to his request for an explanation later. Meanwhile, at the banquet, Alice was also present, standing behind Sarika. When she saw the instructor, she couldn't help but be shocked. her mouth hanging open. A drop of sweat formed on her cheek as she turned her head, recognizing the voice. As she turned around, she saw Alice in a very elegant dress. Alice, holding the skirt with both hands, approached Sarika with a smile, clearly pleased to see her. Alice, with a joyful look, told Sarika that it had been a long time since they had seen each other. Sarika, still confused and a bit wary, asked Alice what she was doing there. Alice placed her hands on her abdomen, closed her eyes, and with a smile, explained that she had only come to get some fresh air, as it was part of her duty. Sarika, however, couldn't shake off her fear. She was deeply worried that Alice, too, would be dragged into the impending disaster. Absorbed in her thoughts, she didn't immediately notice Alice calling out to her, asking if she was okay. Just then, a man wearing a blue outfit appeared, advancing toward them with a graceful stride. He extended a hand to one side and, upon seeing Alice, remarked inwardly that it was like looking at two beautiful flowers. Alice forced a smile, while Sarika, clenching her teeth tightly, grew angry. She thought to herself that she was already overwhelmed, and now this man had shown up. This man, Drenian Nephilis, was the target of their mission. He approached them, placed his hand over his chest, and bowed his head as a sign of respect. He then introduced himself. Meanwhile, in another part of the palace, Cyan, wearing boots and a black suit, was walking down a hallway. He passed through a door and encountered Brian. Turning to him, Cyan, with a calm voice, explained that he was going to assign him a task. Brian, who was standing attentively beside him, responded with a resolute, "Yes, young master." He placed one hand behind his back and the other over his chest, adopting a serious expression as he declared that the knight Brian Kendrick would fulfill any mission. Cyan, however, couldn't help but feel somewhat confused and embarrassed by Brian's overly dramatic demeanor. With a drop of sweat forming on his cheek, he looked at Brian with a puzzled gaze, thinking that this guy had been getting too confident lately. Brian, still holding his fist to his chest, imagined himself surrounded by powerful flames, convinced of his own strength. Cyan, with one hand resting on his waist, approached Brian and extended his other hand, ordering him to go inspect the underground paths of the palace. Brian, despite his bravado, started to get nervous and began sweating. The thought of the dark, eerie underground paths scared him deeply. Cyan's frustration grew as he pointed angrily at Brian, his teeth clenched tightly. He ordered Brian to leave, emphasizing that he had his own reasons for assigning him this mission. Brian, however, looked past Cyan with a surprised expression and told him to look behind. Confused, Cyan asked what he was talking about. Brian explained that a suspicious person was watching him from behind. Cyan turned around and noticed a woman peering at him from a nearby room, her hands gripping the corner as she stared intently at him. Sensing her presence, Cyan felt a pang of disappointment, thinking that this wasn't good. Brian's eyes lit up with determination as he dashed toward the woman, ready to take her down. He extended his hands, clenched his teeth, and assured Cyan not to worry, as he would handle the situation. Cyan, realizing the potential misunderstanding, tried to intervene. With a confused look, he started to tell Brian to wait, but before he could finish speaking, Brian had already pounced on the woman, pinning her to the ground. Cyan then looked closer at the woman and, recognizing her, calmly told Brian to stop, revealing that they already knew this woman. The woman was none other than Nana, disguised as a maid. Brian, still sitting on top of her, turned his head back with a confused look and asked if this was true. Nana, lying on the ground, closed her eyes and apologized, admitting that it was her fault. She had small scratches on her face and appeared somewhat dizzy from the rough handling. Meanwhile, in another part of the palace, a man wearing a red hood descended a secret passage that led deep beneath the palace. Holding a torch, he moved cautiously down the stairs until he reached the end of the passage. The room was dimly lit, but as the man moved his torch from side to side, it illuminated several others dressed similarly in red hoods. The man approached them with a smug smile and declared that it was time to rise. His subordinates, their faces hidden behind masks to conceal their identities, responded to his command. Their eyes began to shine with a sinister light, and they all started to smile, anticipation building for whatever dark event was about to unfold. As the guests chatted and enjoyed the banquet, Princess Erin walked around, looking anxious. She had invited someone special but couldn't find them, making her increasingly frustrated. To calm herself, she touched the necklace her brother had given her, but still felt uneasy. Suddenly, a girl in a blue dress appeared behind her. The girl lifted her skirt slightly and introduced herself with great respect, bowing to the princess. Princess Erin, confused at first, soon recognized the girl as Luna from the Rainreaver family, a second-year student at the academy. Luna smiled warmly, pleased that Erin remembered her. Erin, still surprised, welcomed Luna on behalf of the Empire, remarking that she could never forget such a genius from the kingdom of Garum. Luna, with a gentle smile, hoped that Erin would notice her kindness, just as Cyan had. Curious, Erin asked if Luna knew Cyan. Luna calmly replied that she had been with him just the day before. This news shocked Erin, and without thinking, she asked if they were close. Realizing her slip, she quickly covered her mouth, feeling embarrassed. Luna, noticing Erin's reaction, began to suspect that Erin had feelings for Cyan. Erin blushed deeply, questioning her own feelings for Cyan, while Luna smiled knowingly. Just then, a loud scream for help interrupted them. Both girls looked in the direction of the noise, surprised and concerned, wondering what was happening. They stood there in shock, unsure of what to do next. At the banquet, a woman in a panic screamed for help, urgently asking others to call the guards. Before she could finish, a hooded man with a glowing gaze appeared behind her. With a swift, deadly slash, he cut her neck, and her headless body fell to the ground. The scene was chaotic, with the woman's blood staining the man's clothes. Princess Erin, paralyzed with fear, could hardly believe that such a monster had entered the palace. Luna stared at the man, puzzled about his identity and origin. The crowd, terrified, began to flee as the man advanced toward them, his eyes still glowing. Drops of blood splattered on his mask, and he fixed his gaze on Princess Erin, revealing that she was his target. Erin, now in a panic, wondered who these attackers were and where they had come from. Luna, standing beside her, looked at the man with concern, knowing the situation was dire. Meanwhile, in another room of the palace, Nana, Cyan's maid, introduced herself with a kind smile, while Emily, visibly upset, fell to her knees. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she asked Cyan if he had left her for Nana. Cyan, crossing his arms and closing his eyes, assured her that he had not. Brian, standing nearby, remained silent, clenching his fists. Cyan approached Emily and calmly asked if Askell had brought her. Emily, still crying, confirmed that Askell had indeed brought her and even offered her a job, as he desired her greatly. Cyan's expression turned angry when he heard Emily's story. He demanded to know what job she was referring to. Emily explained that days ago, Askell had offered her a job as his maid, but she had declined because she wanted to be available for Cyan's return. Cyan, troubled, asked Emily if she was certain about her decision. Emily, feeling exhausted, said she thought Askell might still be interested in her. Cyan, deep in thought, decided it was too dangerous outside and asked Brian to protect Emily and Nana. Brian, confused but understanding, accepted the task. Cyan then mentioned he needed to leave, recalling that Emily was absent in his past life. He remembered catching and restraining Kellen, who was spying on him. Filled with rage, Cyan warned Askell not to harm his people before leaving the room and closing the door behind him. Inside, Emily took out a red bow tie with a diamond in the center, a gift from Askell for Cyan. Distraught, she realized she had forgotten to give it to him, and she fell to her knees crying, feeling foolish for forgetting it. Brian, standing nearby, clenched his fists in silence, while Nana, observing Emily, began to sweat, finding her behavior strange. As Emily held the bow tie aloft, it emitted a dark energy. Nana's eyes changed to a dragon's form as she stared at the bow tie, puzzled by the unsettling smell. As night fell, Askell, gripping his sword, smiled and told Prince Luenel that the plan had begun. Luinel, equally pleased, remarked that the day had finally arrived and praised Askell for his efforts. Askell mentioned that their gift had been delivered and that Boris had been quite useful. Luinel, excited, grinned maniacally, eager to use Boris to disrupt the peaceful empire. Askell, with a serious expression, agreed, and Luinel, with a sinister smile, said it was time to reveal who the empire truly needed. Meanwhile, chaos erupted at the banquet. Princess Erin directed everyone to evacuate, urging them to leave the rest to the guards. Lunav, seeing Erin at the exit, insisted that she should evacuate first, but Erin, calmly, said they needed to help others first. Surprised, Lunav decided to assist Erin. Erin thanked her with a smile. Inside the palace, the hooded man attacked, launching a series of cuts at the princess. Guards tried to block his attacks, but were easily thrown back. A determined black-haired guard shouted orders to stop the attacker. Suddenly, he heard a scream behind him and saw more hooded men appearing from the stairs. A giant man, holding a guard's severed head, was crushing it with brutal force, causing the guard to scream in agony. Horrified, the black-haired guard, the captain, could hardly believe the violence unfolding. Another guard's shout brought him back to reality, and he turned to see demonic beasts with sharp teeth attacking and slaughtering the guards with ease. The ground was littered with the corpses of guards, as high-level demonic beasts called mandrakes, normally seen only on the front lines, attacked. The captain, overwhelmed and in despair, realized they were doomed. As the beasts prepared to attack, Sarika intervened. Using a burst of mana, she created a large hole in one mandrake's mouth, killing it instantly. As the beast's remains fell, Sarika landed gracefully, ordered the others to use the moment to evacuate, and took a defensive stance. The captain, recognizing Sarika as an academy instructor, was momentarily distracted. A hooded man appeared behind him, surrounded by malevolent energy, preparing to strike. Alice, however, was ready. She jumped in, unsheathed her sword, and executed a quick blade technique, cutting the attacker in half. The captain, stunned, watched as Sarika, now emitting powerful green mana, took a defensive stance. Alice, landing beside him, urged him to leave the area. Shocked but understanding, the captain turned to the other guards and instructed them to focus on protecting the evacuees. Just then, a demonic tree extended its sharp branches, attacking. As the branches neared, Sarika and Alice prepared to defend. However, the branches abruptly changed direction and headed towards the ceiling, prompting both women to turn and assess the new threat. They were shocked and quickly went on alert when they saw the sharp branches advancing towards the door through which they were evacuating people. Erin, seeing the attack aimed at her, panicked. Lunav, confused, tried to understand the situation. Sarika soon realized that Erin was the target. Desperate, she alerted Erin to the imminent danger. As the sharp branches neared Erin's face, she was paralyzed with fear. Just in time, the captain appeared, wielding his sword with both hands. He cut the branches in half, saving Erin. Despite his efforts, a small branch grazed Erin's cheek, causing a minor cut and a trickle of blood. Tears filled Erin's eyes as she stood trembling. Thank you all for watching our video today. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing to our channel and turning on notifications so you won't miss any future uploads.